No, man.
Whoa! I got caught on my pee filter, Seth. I think I'm recording now, right? Hold
You're
on.
recording?
Yes. Oh, there we go. We're recording. Yes.
Nice.
Hello, Seth Taylor. Welcome to the Punk Theology Studio. I've got all this.
Oh, is that what I'm in? I'm in the Punk Theology Studio doing an ASI podcast.
This is
Nice.
that's right, man. This
And I'm
is
drinking tea.
social
This is the wrong
distancing.
beverage.
What is
Tea
it?
is the wrong beverage, I assume, for to be in this studio.
Are you drinking coffee, Seth?
No, I'm drinking tea. I had a little
Oh,
espresso,
okay.
but I finished a bottle of scotch tonight, and I told my wife that is my last drink until we're going on a vacation in June, to beach kind of thing. I said, I've got quarantine gut, and I've never had a real gut in my life, but I've got quarantine gut, and I just told her that's it, I'm done, because I've been drinking way more than I usually drink. Like
Yeah.
every night, man, we're just like finishing it with a couple glasses of scotch or something.
I'm kind of poor, so I'm drinking. I have a mayonnaise glass.
Nice.
This is not mayonnaise, by the way.
Okay.
I can't afford mayonnaise.
Right.
Georgetown Brewery here in Seattle.
Is that a PBR? Are you drinking PBR in a mayonnaise glass?
No, it's even worse. It's natural light. No,
Oh, that's not. Is that non-alcoholic?
no, it's got alcohol. It's
Okay.
just very light beer. It's mostly
Yeah,
water, which is fine.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's good to see you, man. It's
It's good to see you too.
you got a lot going on with
I
what you
do.
guys
I
are
am
doing over
busier
there.
than I've ever been in my entire life right now. It's been
The
pretty.
My Pilgrimage podcast is getting up and running. I hear your brother.
Yeah, we're hoping to launch that by mid-May. It's kind of exciting news. mypilgrimage.com. It's actually, the site's down right now because we recently got Triple X Church basically had a big shift in leadership, and they've kind of gone hard right, to be honest. And My Pilgrimage is not a hard right theological space, and so we went to them and said, we see that you're probably not going to have the support for this anymore. Would you guys allow us to take it? And they just said, yep, go for it. Just give us a little cut if you guys ever do anything with it. And of course, they didn't know that we were just planning on giving it away. So so we are in the process of opening. We've created a pretty epic library, to be honest with you, of video content, just hours and hours and hours of video content and teaching and all kinds of stuff. And it's been behind this wall, and Triple X Church has been trying to sell it for years, and we finally just decided that it was time to open it up because freedom should be free. So we're when mypilgrimage.com launches again, it'll be mostly just you can. There's a resource center. You just sign up and you can just go right in and take advantage of it. And we're going to start a podcast and just start giving voices, and we're going to have Russ on the podcast at some point. And I don't know if I can fly you to Maui, though. It's going to be based out of Maui, where my brother lives, but pretty sure you're going to have to be here in Seattle. We'll have to do it remotely because I'm not sure maybe we'll do it from the Punk Theology studios there.
Who knows? But yeah, that's awesome, man. And I like what you guys got going on with that, and it's a different approach. And I wanted to talk about a little theology today on the show because I think it's important. People that follow you and people that have followed the ASI podcast over the years, we both have a pretty deep spiritual thread to these things. And it's hard for folks, and I try to explain that in the last few episodes. Philosophically, the word spirit, for example, means the value of the thing that you can't put a price on, right? Like you can't eat it, you can't consume it.
I would need you to unpack that a bit for me.
Okay. So you can't consume it, you can't sell it, you can't put a price tag on it, you can't have sex with it, right? It's a value of something.
If you can, people will find a way.
That's right.
Somebody somewhere will find a way to have sex with it.
Right. But that's kind of the philosophical, right, definition of spirit. And in the theological term, spirit is breath, right? Like that's what the word means, breath or breathing out life. So explain to me a little bit, Seth, and I know I've had you on the show before. I don't want to rehash things, but just getting into your approach spiritually. You wrote a book called Feels Like Redemption, where you explain a lot of your story. you and I both
Yeah.
grew up in, like, Christian, right? Very dominantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you
Pentecost. We were holy rollers,
approach
baby.
these? What's that?
We were holy rollers. We were Pentecostal, like chosen ones. That
Right.
was the way I was raised, man.
Yeah, yeah. And just a lot of the stuff we learned was not helping with breaking the cycle of habitual, unwanted sexual behavior, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, actually, it's funny because for me, it didn't really. I didn't have any unwanted quote unquote sexual behavior until I was about 27, right? Like when I got married is when it started for me,
Right.
and it's just because I was so repressed. It was just mind blowing. I mean,
Yeah.
at age 24, I don't think I knew what masturbation meant. No, I probably learned by then. I think it was about 19, 20 years old. I finally learned that. But I mean, I was so repressed. And so, I mean, no one had ever taught me anything. I came from a space where I mean, it was hardcore purity culture. I mean, I was smack in the center of the purity culture.
Wow.
So it was, it was very, very, very repressed. And honestly, I mean, my religious upbringing it wasn't the cause of my trauma. Well, I mean, it was part of my trauma, but it was the cause of the repression of my sexuality, which led to addiction.
Right.
No question. Yeah.
That word repressed can be a trigger word for a lot of religious folks, I've noticed.
Sure.
Over
Oh
the
yeah,
years,
yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So, and that's something I had to explain on the show. Like, repression is not like some people look at that and say, oh, well, if you're not repressed, then you're just like having sex with anyone, you're taking your pants off at the bus stop or whatever, right? Like, that's not what
Yeah.
it means. The opposite of sexual self-control is kind of, it's not repression, right?
Well, what was funny is I think you have to start at the polars, at the poles, right? You've got complete repression and if you look at your sexuality as a fundamental evil, which I think there's quite a large segment of the Christian culture that sees it that way. They see it as a fundamental evil. Maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, they definitely treat it that way. And then the other polar opposite is what you're saying. We could say radical freedom. Radical freedom is you can do anything you want, period. You can have sex with a totem pole if you want. I mean, it's just whatever you want to do, you can do whenever you want to do it, because no matter what you do, the divine perspective never changes.
Right.
It is a fixed point in the universe of love, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we call grace. And I think the writers of the New Testament, for the most part, were pretty radical when it came to their understanding of that.
Yes.
And I think Jesus was quite radical in his understanding of that. But you have to start. That has to be the starting point, right? Okay, we are either trash or we are completely free, and you have to choose your starting line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the thing when I came to freedom. It wasn't so much like finding a new spot on the journey. It was more just like finally able to look back and just erase that process and start over. Like, my new starting point is freedom, right? And that's what we wrote. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but our working title, when my brother and I were working on that book on Feels Like Redemption, we called it Porn Pilgrim. And it was like and it was the quest for freedom you can feel. And it was like, we're starting this journey over. And my brother he took an old painting. Remember Pilgrim's Progress?
Yeah.
Remember that classic? He took the classic painting of Pilgrim, and he's got his backpack and his staff, and he's got his Bible in his hands, and he's kind of looking up, and the light of God is shining down, right? And he's walking, and he took it and he took the Bible out, and he photoshopped a Playboy, like into his hands. It was Porn Pilgrim. And of course, when Triple X Church picked it up, they're like, well, we got to change the title. And I remember Craig, I'm like, why, man? It's pretty great. And he's like, yeah, you can't put porn in the title, man. I'm like, why not? People will love that.
Right.
But that was the idea, is that we decided that's it. We're going to begin from the standpoint that we are good at our core, the imago Dei, right? That is the theological idea.
Yeah.
And that radical freedom is the starting point, that nothing I can do can separate me from the love of God and the grace that was given, period.
Right.
And that's tough though, because that starts to dismantle a lot of theological structures, lots and lots and lots of theological structures. But even the theological structures doesn't really matter. I mean, it triggers people not because the belief systems or the theologies are different. It triggers people because in order to go down that path fully, you have to first die. All the
Yeah.
things that have been keeping you alive, all those belief systems and all that trauma and all the garbage that you have going on inside you has to die, and you have to kind of lose yourself before you can actually find that type of freedom. And I don't even try. I mean, it's funny. I on my pilgrimage, there's this one guy. We have a Facebook group for my pilgrimage. It's kind of a closed group, and we have this guy. You got this one guy that keeps going, and he's the only guy in the entire thing that just every once in a while just wants to come on and just be an a-hole, and just he's a hardcore, unconscious, conservative, right wing. You guys are all, hell is real, just period, and he just slams away. So people, for the most part in that group, it's a group where we facilitate stories. People tell their stories. There's a lot of grace. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of insight. There's a lot of honesty. There's a lot of vulnerability. And you got the one a-hole that just comes in. And every time I get in there, I asked him, somebody was talking about, I'm not sure hell is real. And he just comes in and he says, hell, period, is, period, real, period. And it is real. And he starts doing this thing. And I said, hey, can you tell us how you know that? And he said, I'm not going to answer that ridiculous question. And I finally said, well, okay, I will remind, and everybody knows he's the a-hole. And so I just, said, we'll remind you, hey, I'll remind you one more time, that why you can't insult people here, And he gets in there and he starts going, here's the theology. Here, this is how it is. It's the place of eternal damnation and all this kind of stuff. Now, I have a master's degree in theology, okay? And that doesn't make me more special, but I'm a hell of a lot more educated theologically than most people, right? And I could sit there and just tell this guy everything about where his belief system came from, who came up with it, why they came up with it, the purposes, the political purposes that it played, all that kind of stuff. It wouldn't do anything at all. Nothing theological can have an impact on just about anybody. It just doesn't change that way. But grace does,
Social media is kind of like that, right? Like I've noticed that about social media. You're just sort of grinding away at someone. You're not changing anyone's mind.
Yeah, it's
That's
ridiculous.
the weird thing. When there's not that face-to-face, eye-to-eye thing, people can just go on for hours and just.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And it's not even, I mean, the face-to-face and eye-to-eye, there's an energetic component to it. When you shift energetically. So like, this guy was going at me and I just said, hey, I'm not going to try to convince you you're wrong. It's okay. You can think what you want to think. I said, but kindness has to happen. And I'll just take intelligence at this point. If you can just be intelligently articulate why you think the way you do, that I'd be helpful. I just literally approached him that way instead of going, hey, I have a master's degree in theology and you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And the cool thing is he went, okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be such a tool. Is what he said. I'm like, yeah, don't be a tool, Yeah. And then everything's okay. It was all good because there's an energetic shift to it. And then we did that typing, but there is something about that, like the way Facebook facilitates conversation and stuff like that, that is uniquely centered, uniquely barricaded, uniquely. It is a giant echo chamber, and I don't know. I mean, right now it's a fascinating thing because I just want to unfriend every single friend I have that disagrees with me. I just want to unfriend them. And it's not because I can't handle disagreement. It's just because I don't like reading that shit. And I'm certainly not going to engage in it. I'm not going to argue with it. I'm not going to do any of that. That doesn't do anybody any good,
I find that people that can, though, are more like, those are the people I want to stay friends with, Like, sure. If we disagree, why do we have to break up, There's some people that just can't. They just can't stay in the room.
Well, and Facebook's not a place you can. I can hang with a friend I disagree with in person.
Yeah.
But Facebook, there's just no point. There's no point in engaging in this because it's a weaponized space.
Exactly, it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a weaponized space. But if we can, even when I came and did your guys' punk theology thing all that time ago, I didn't agree with anybody in the room,
Mm-hmm.
And and some of them were kind of somewhat weaponized, but but we could sit there and we could work in grace with each other and love with each other, and there's a space for that there. But social media for the most part is very weaponized. Instagram actually has, as toxic as it is, it doesn't facilitate the same type of verbal violence, if you will, that Facebook does. But I don't know, it's really something to watch it right now. It's a whole different monster, and it's just so fascinating to watch with this giant, everybody in the world is triggered at the same time, which is why you'd mentioned before we started recording, how, porn is just shot through the roof. It's because the
Yeah.
entire world's triggered. Like
Yeah.
everybody is triggered, and they're like, where can I feel loved, accepted, safe? Where can I feel like the world is, the way it's supposed to be again? Well, porn. Yeah, that's a
Yeah, that's
nice little.
something that our friend Jay Stringer said. He was talking
Yeah.
about the marketing of pornography in Italy, and one of the things that that Pornhub used to reel people in was like to keep you company, right, during this
Right.
pandemic. We've eliminated whatever the fees for joining premium or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting language. That's an interesting language from a porn company on how to reel people in. Hey, you don't have to be
To keep you
alone
company.
anymore, right?
Right. Yeah.
Come on
Yeah.
in. We've got company.
Yeah.
And I don't like some of and you and I talked about that a lot. I think that's part of where we hit it off. Like I don't
Yeah.
necessarily like disease language,
Sure.
and this triggered me when I was in recovery for alcohol, for example. And I'm still I still drink. I just don't drink myself
Sure.
unconscious anymore. But according to
Right.
AA, I should never drink again because I have the gene and and all
Right. Yeah.
that stuff. And I always had that thing in the back of my head when they would talk about the disease. And I'm like, I don't know anyone, Seth, who would go into a 7-Eleven, for example, and buy a 6-pack of coronavirus, right?
Right.
Like no one does that. No one, right, orders up on Amazon,
Right.
send me herpes, right?
Right.
Like no
Right.
one does that. It's not that kind of disease, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and then that's again, disease is a word,
Yeah.
dis-ease. All it means is there's something wrong here, and it's just easier to label something and medicate it, than it is to actually try to dive into the depth of what it actually is. And that's, for most people, that's how it is. I mean, the coronavirus has been really interesting to watch because ultimately it's playing the role of robbing us of our most basic narrative that we
Uh,
are safe. Right?
yeah.
It robs us of the narrative. Hopefully the world is coming to a recognition that we were under an illusion that we were safe and secure
Yeah.
and that we had control, because we never had any of those things. We had the illusion of those things, and I get that. I mean, human evolution is a story of trying to come more and more and more and more to a place of safety and security, so that we can elevate to higher ways of being. It's Maslow's hierarchy, right? But
Yeah.
but it is an illusion.
Yeah.
Just like that, it was all taken away.
Yeah.
All of it taken. I mean, the madness that we saw in the first few weeks, right? The toilet paper's, gone, and all the, the way the conspiracy theories have gone crazy, and all that kind of thing, and the insanity. I mean, it's fascinating watching right now how, we're coming to that spot now where the economic impact is very intense, right?
Yeah.
And I'm watching people I know and love, family members, on Facebook every day, just blasting away at how we've got to get back to work. We got to get back to work because, I have a friend of mine who made like probably $700,000 last year, and has watched all that kind of fall apart. And it's a weird thing because the way they're talking is the sky is falling and we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And I just want to grab them and just shake them and smack them kind of airplane style, pop, pop. Hey,
Yeah.
get a hold of yourself. You're still here.
Yeah.
You're still here, and you're okay. So you're gonna be all right. Let's just take a deep breath and let's get this virus the fuck out of here, man.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
And this is one of
there's
those points. Speaking of theology, I'm reminded of Ecclesiastes 7, right? Like I love that chapter, like where
yeah,
the Gospel Coalition shared this. I didn't read the whole story, but they shared this piece of that said um, funerals are better than festivals. Sometimes
right.
funerals are better than festivals. And again,
Interesting.
going back to that definition of spiritual, right? Like
Yeah,
the idea of what's valuable is in the toilet right now. All the plans that people had, including myself and my wife, we thought,
yeah,
I would start to make some money. Things were going pretty well. We
yeah,
were going to go to Vancouver, BC, spend the weekend there, do some record shopping, buy vinyl, at all these cool hipster record shops in Vancouver, and
yeah.
that's not happening. But other people, like they had, it's not just the plans. It's prom. It's my sports I mean, you've done some work in that area. Like, so there's
Dude.
people's
Yeah,
identity is attached to
yeah,
my senior year.
yeah,
I mean, some of that stuff is heavy, right, Seth?
yeah. Oh man, it's been wild. It's been wild to watch all the loss. I lost a lot of stuff. I lost a book deal, 6-figure book deal. I lost because the company that was going to publish it, all their offices got shut down. I lost a bunch of really good speaking gigs. I lost Sounders Timbers tickets, 8th row, $500 I spent on these tickets. I mean, I lost a lot of stuff. But what's funny is that every single thing, you know, Rob Bell taught me this. I remember him said, you know, I asked him one time, I said, how do you do transitions well? That was my question. And he just said, you have funerals, lots of them. That's what he said. It's ironic you say it like that. He said, you have funerals. He goes, everything, he goes, you have to grieve well. You have to be good at grieving, because for everything you gain, you lose something else. And a lot of people struggle to move forward into that next thing because there's some part of them still clinging and not willing to grieve the loss of the other thing, even if it's something that was difficult, you know? And that's the thing. I've watched people losing, and they're still clinging to the old thing, you know, instead of being able to recognize it's a launch pad. It's funny because you talk about the sports thing. I had a session. So I have several clients that are professional athletes right now. And one of them is a AA ball player for the Giants. The coronavirus thing hit. He got released. And he's taking this radically positive. He's like, I'm telling you, this is just a launch pad for me, man. Like, this is going to literally, I'm going to shift. Somebody's going to pick me up and I'm going to move into the next level in my life and in my career. And he's just seeing it that way. And then I have some other clients who really struggle with it. You know, I have this one guy who's kind of the back end of his pro career a little bit. He's a soccer player. And he's really struggled, especially too, because the athletes are all being asked to take major pay cuts and stuff like that. And he's really struggled with it because his whole identity is the game. And he doesn't have a game. He's like, I don't know who I am without this game. And it's been really interesting. But I was working with a kid today. He's a player rep for Chicago in MLS. And he was talking to me. He was giving me some insight into the meeting that they had between the union and the league when they're talking about all the players taking 50% pay cuts. And they're all just hyper triggered. They're all clinging to this is all we have. This is all we are. And they're watching a whole season of their careers. And those guys, their days are numbered. You know, as a pro athlete, your days are numbered. They were really, really struggling with it. I was coaching soccer at Bellevue High School, and we had a number 1 ranked team in the entire state. We were going to go after that state championship. We had 8 seniors. Every one of them had to watch it go. The coach he was struggling. He's like, I'm really struggling with the loss of this season. And he was, you know, he told me, he's like, hey, if I'm in a few weeks, I'm still really struggling with grief. I need some help. And I was like, yeah, just give me a call. And it's been really interesting to watch the loss. And some people are good at losing, and they're good at grieving, and they're good at dying, and they're good at being in the unknown. And ironically, the Christians seem to be the worst ones at that. You know what I mean? Which is weird, because that's literally the core essence of the teaching of Jesus, like, was your death, right? And then the unknown, and then resurrection, right? First comes the death, dying to self, taking up your cross, this idea of crucifixion. And that's the thing. I was talking to someone who was talking about I did an interview for a podcast in Australia a few weeks ago. These guys down in Australia, and they'd had Pete Rollins on recently, and they were quoting that kind of famous thing he did where he was talking about denying the resurrection, you know? And I was telling him, I said, I think that most of us, the problem is we actually deny the crucifixion. We're not willing to allow ourselves to truly move into that loss and that Good Friday and that Holy Saturday, the holy unknowing, you know? I think we struggle with that. And I'm watching that with coronavirus. It's been interesting to watch people really cling and go to war with each other. I was over at Target the other day, and, you know, the anxiety, it's interesting, the energy in stores, especially in grocery stores right now. It's just so, every time I come out of Fred Meyer, I'm just like, ooh, and there's this energy all over me. And I watched a girl, she was ready to go to war with this poor lady working behind the counter at Target because the thing she ordered online was supposed to be there and it wasn't. And I mean, I just, oh man, I'm standing behind him listening to this whole thing. I just wanted to go out and go, peace. Hey, are you all right? I just want to, but there's just, you know what I mean? But but her ego is clinging to life with everything she got, that this thing I ordered online, it was like a TV or something, has to be here, you know?
Yeah.
And I just feel bad. That's what I think. Remember in the scriptures when Jesus comes to Jerusalem, he's coming back to Jerusalem, and he looks at it and says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Right.
Yeah.
How, you know, if you only knew how I wanted to, like a mother hen, I wanted to put you under my wings.
Yeah.
I wanted to cuddle you basically under my wings. I think that's what I'm seeing. If I was, in his framework, I'm looking at us and I'm going, oh, you guys,
Yeah.
look at how you're struggling to just be okay with what is, just lost.
That's something that the first interview I did with you, and we had a discussion beforehand too, and you and I hit it off, I think, also because we both see the world in layers, right?
Yeah.
Like this
Sure.
this kind of layer of identity of this is what's valuable, and not just what's valuable, but this is who you are, right? You're this person. You're this person that shows up and does this thing every day.
Yeah.
I was also asked that by a friend of mine. He's like, how are you dealing with all this, And I go, I'm dealing with it pretty well. And he kind of pressed into me on it and like, are you sure? Because I'm a guy who's like struggled with mental health and addiction
Right.
and
Sure.
self-destructive behaviors. Like, oh, I'm concerned, Russ. Like, really, how are you doing? And
Yeah.
and I've done a lot of work, and I've had to really, in the last few weeks, really start to pull from underneath to the actions of some of that work.
Yeah.
On the other show, we talk about like that. There's that kid in me, that egoic little kid, and sometimes I just got to pull him aside and go, "Hey, listen, buddy, it's gonna be all right."
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there's that spirit in me that's learning to parent myself and
Yeah.
say, "Hey,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
gonna be okay."
Yeah.
Because it drops into that other layer. But
Yeah.
people don't see that layer, right, Seth? I think that's why the woman freaks out at the grocery store. Or my wife shared with me a story today that she was reading. Somebody shared on Facebook. My daughter and my son both cut their teeth in retail, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
their first jobs were like retail boot camp. It's very
Right.
much socially like fucking boot camp retail, right?
Yeah.
And she shared this story about retail workers are going, hey, this is not Disneyland, because there's people going into stores like Target and Walmart
Yeah.
and loitering. Like they just
Right.
hang out there
Right.
because they feel right, like they're around people, they're
Right.
doing
Right.
something, they're in the space where
Yeah.
it's so interesting, Seth, because this is, Derek and Steve and I. Steve is the boomer, Derek's a millennial, I'm the guy in the middle.
Right.
This is all our first freaking pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine too. And my kids are like, this happened like every few years, right? And you're like, no.
Every 100
My
years.
son,
100 years.
my daughter
right?
today, she finally lost it today. She was just like, I miss my friends. She was crying. She's 7. She's like, yeah, I miss my friends so much. And she really does, man. Misses them. It's really something. But
So how is
what you were
what was that?
what's that?
I
No, you go
think
ahead.
I cut
You go
you
ahead.
off there.
No, no worries.
So relationships, that's part of what's in the news too, is like people are either having lots and lots of sex and they're projecting a baby boom in the future,
Right.
or
Oh,
on the other extreme, the divorce lawyers, their phones are ringing off the hook.
yeah. Yeah, a buddy of mine's going through divorce right now. He's going, and it's like really, he's like, the proceedings are crawling because he's had so many people. I mean, it's just been such a difficult process. But no, I think that, yeah, I think that's a pretty typical kind of thing. You're going to see a lot of people, move towards each other, away from each other. But again, you're stripping everyone of so many of the illusions that keep their lives compartmentalized and keep them alive, keeps them surviving. If I cram you in a room and I take everything away, then now we're going to find out who you really are. But it's, I mean, and a lot of it, money, anxiety, and all this kind of stuff that brings up. And I imagine people are getting really honest. I think there's probably a lot of honesty out there right now, and not everyone is equipped to handle that type of honesty and to handle that kind of thing. So my hope is, even with all the divorce and stuff, maybe we'll have a lot happier people on the other side of it. Maybe some things are being said that have been pent up for years and need to be said. I kind of try to paint it with a little more of a positive light, because even though people see divorce as a negative, the truth is there's a lot of marriages out there that would be better off, if two people went and found some actual real joy and health and happiness, as opposed to the toxic thing that exists in that space. My wife and I, it's fascinating because we've gotten so much busier during this time that, there's a little bit of a disconnect. And we were talking about that the other day. I'm like, because she's like, I come in and she's on her laptop and she's working. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna go watch a show after the kids are now.
Yeah.
I'll go watch a show in the living room. She goes, no, can you sit in here and watch it? I'm like, no. She goes, why just want me to be with you? I go, babe, I'm being with me. You're not being with me by working while I watch TV,
Yeah.
And of course, please. I'm like, okay, fine. I said, but you can't interrupt me every 30 seconds to try to tell me something. And of course, that's what she did. I just kept pausing and pausing and pausing. And I'm like, do you see? And she's like, yeah, sorry, But yeah, we've actually had a hard time connecting, on any of these levels because we've just gotten busier and busier. And now we have to find a work-life balance, which is unique. It's kind of a weird time to find it. I mean, my kids, part of it's because the kids are home. We have a small apartment in the city,
Right.
and my kids are home all the time now, which is it's been one of the hardest parts. There's probably a lot of fight happening in front of the kids out there right now.
Right. Yeah. That's something my wife and I this morning. I was like, it's kind of cool. Our kids are growing up, right?
Oh my gosh,
like
you have
seeing
no
some
idea.
of our friends on Facebook and stuff, and sex is great. Like you're just waking up and just doors open to the bedroom, like there's no one else.
I cannot imagine it. I cannot imagine that at all. At all. We almost came close this morning. We started the process a little bit. Within 30 seconds, we had children on top of us, and they were like, "I'm hungry," and I just got up and the dog starts scratching the door. I'm like, so I go and I take the kids out. I take the dog out, take him in and do his thing. Come back and they're like, "Go get breakfast." And I come in and Amy's like, "Are you gonna come back to bed?" She's with that kind of looking around. I'm like, she goes, "Are you gonna be a good dad?" I'm like, "What do you think?" Like I'm not. Like I have to. It's like this is not a choice. So it's actually been quite. Having our kids home has been disruptive. I actually had to send everybody last week. I sent the whole family away. Like my mother-in-law's place up on Woodby Island is like, I need you guys to leave because I have a book I'm supposed to be writing right now. And I haven't been on top of 20 clients right now and all the other work I'm doing with my company and all that stuff. I'm supposed to be writing a book. And I'm like, I need everyone to leave. I'm shutting my phone off and I'm writing, but I literally have to go to extremes just to get the words on the page now.
Nothing like interruption to jack with your creative process, right? Like,
dude, I can do a lot of things with my kids around, but I can't do my therapeutic work with clients. And I cannot be creative. It's like, I can't write stuff. I literally tried one day. I just sat on the couch, put the headphones on. I'm like, guys, I'm going to try to write. Just please leave me alone. Within 5 minutes, my son was sitting on the back of the couch with his leg draped over me. My daughter was right next to me on her little tablet thing. And I'm just like, and she just, and you're not going to get mad at them, because I realize the day will come quite soon where they don't want to be near me anymore. Yeah,
see, that's an
hard.
interesting segue, by the way, into this topic, because the theological, so we're getting into theology, and I really want to touch on this because there's so many Christians that are more stuck than even secular people, right? And I think that what you just touched on is a big part of that, because they see God as an abusive dad, right? Like, I do not, you look at that, like that guy in the Facebook group, like, you're going to hell, right?
Right.
Your kids, you love your kids more than you love, cranking out a book or whatever you need to do. Like that style of love, what you're demonstrating, which is what the cross is, right? Like we love to say that, oh, well, Jesus had to pay, and this is called propitiation in theological terms, right? Like God is kind of two-faced and he put Jesus, right? Like I had to kill Jesus, like God is a pagan all of a sudden, right? Like we got to put the ram on the thing and slaughter. And that's not what's going on.
Right.
But that's popular Christianity. When I started talking about some of this stuff, I lost like half of my listeners. When I started really just trying to pull people out of this idea that God is up there ready to throw you into the wastebasket of hell because you're jerking off to porn or whatever you're doing. Like grace is not valued. I mean, even me in my story, when I started going to AC3 and I met with, Dan and Rick and these guys, they were the first ones to really listen to me, not tell me to do shit, right? Like, well, you need to read your Bible more and you need to pray more and you need to be obedient. They just listened. Right. And then even Dan dropped the F-bomb, which I found like, oh, wow, like we could talk like normal human beings, He just let me talk. And he goes, that's really fucked up. And I'm like, wow, okay, yeah,
I remember when I was a kid, man, if I heard a Christian swear, even just say hell, I'd be like, it'd scare the crap out of me. Like, what's gonna happen? What's happening? What's happening?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's part of this story too, is we believe in volcano God. And what you just talked about with your kids, that's how God loves us. Like this idea of Abba Father, like that word Abba is in the book a lot. I mean, we have the English definition of love. Like I love burritos, I
Right.
love the Mariners, I love my
I
wife,
love
I love my
lamb.
kids.
I love
It's
lamb.
not the same,
Yeah.
but we don't, you know. So talk about that a little bit, Seth. Like this idea of volcano God, how does that keep people stuck in their unwanted behaviors?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's something that we believe in or we,
Yeah.
I think that we create and we unconsciously project and create that, right? And it's an idol. Clearly, I mean, most people's representation of God, if not all, at some level, is an idol, right? When we're dealing with something where we create. I mean, I on a very regular basis, when I have Christian clients, okay, we have a conversation at some point during our work where I say, "Can I ask you about your God?" And understand, for your audience, I'm a Christian. Okay, I am a
Right.
Christian. I'm not an evangelical Christian for sure. I'm not. I am a Christian mystic. I am very much in the ancient Celtic tradition. It's, but when I ask them, like, I'll give you a great example. Like, I had this kid, she's 19 years old. She's a college soccer player. So I work with a lot of athletes, and she's a college soccer player at a local small Christian college. And it's the school where I played when I was young. And the coach is a friend of mine. He called me and said, "I got this player. I need you to work with her. She's having panic attacks, like every practice." She goes, she's getting to the point where she just comes to practice, brings a book, sits down and reads, because if she touches the ball, she's going to start to panic. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll start working with her. And the very first session, I said to her, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "You a Christian?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "So do you pray about this? Do you ask God to help you with this?" And she goes, "All the time." And I said, "And what's he say?" She goes, "He mostly doesn't say anything." It's a very basic thing. I go, "Wow, that must be tough. It must
Yeah.
be tough just being ignored." She goes, "I try not to think about it." And she just articulated most people's experience, but she was much more conscious of it than most, because she had somebody asking her these very direct questions, and
Yeah.
she suffered enough that she was ready to break. But that's most people's reality. If everyone were to go, "Oh, I'm going to rewind my life and think about how many things I prayed for that never happened, and then how many times I said, I watched someone came out of a good surgery because they had a skilled doctor, and we go, praise to God." My uncle, 2 days ago, there was a big text message thread in my family because my uncle had open heart surgery. This is really complicated surgery too. Like, they were describing what was going on. I'm like, whoa. And he comes out and like, praise the Lord, he's great. And I just wanted to go, praise the doctor. That's amazing. 8 years of medical school will give you, some serious skill. But I get why they do it. So I asked this girl, I said, "Can I ask you a couple questions about your God?" She goes, "Well, yeah." And I go, "Is your God a man or a woman?" She goes, whoa, he's both. He's both. Isn't that funny? He's
Right.
both. I go, come on. I go, don't give me your theological training answer with your hip new theology. I said, I want to know, when you pray to your God, are you praying to a man or a woman? When you orient your body towards this God? And she goes, it's definitely a man. I go, right. Okay. I said, is your God white or a person of color? She goes, he's white. Right. I go, is your God old or young? And she said, he's definitely old. I go, about how old, if you had to guess? She goes, I'm 90. She knew it right there.
Wow.
About
Right.
90. Oh, wow. I go, wow, that's pretty old. I said, last question. I said, is your God up or down? She said, what do you mean? I said, when you pray, do you pray up? You pray down? You pray here? She goes, up, for sure. I go, and then I just leaned in. She was sitting there and she was kind of in a deep space. I leaned in and I said, do you believe that the creator of the universe is a 90-year-old white man in the sky? And then she just goes, it's pretty silly, isn't it? I go, yes. I go, but let's look at it for what it is. I go, does it make sense now that he's not responding to your prayers? He's not real. And she's like, yeah. I go, now, if we can come to a point where we can face that God and start to ask why we created that God in our image and what role that God has played in helping us survive, I go, we might be able to dissolve that connection. And on the other side, I have a feeling that God is going to show up. And we are going to experience it for the first time. And that's what the Jews called Yahweh. They left a space in their theology for the mystery. You hinted at the beginning when you said breath is spirit and breath, right? Because you were hinting, originally that's the Ruach, right? That's in the Hebrew. Yeah. They're saying that there is this mystery. God is fundamentally mystery. And on the other side, right? On the other side of this idol being disintegrating, we can experience that. And even as the Jewish religion over thousands of years built this extremely idolatrous religion that Jesus came to rip to shreds, right? They still at least held this theological space, in their tradition to go, oh yeah, all this talking we're doing, it doesn't mean anything, because God cannot be contained. God cannot be reduced. God cannot be understood. God cannot be conceived of, right? But there's power there. And what I've seen in my healing, and what you've seen in your healing, and what that girl, that was our first session. We talked about that. 3 months later, she was a starter on that soccer team. Nice. She was a starting college soccer player playing with joy and ability, like you wouldn't believe, because she was willing to start to kind of go at the trauma that was held in her body, which was the source. Her ego had constructed the God to keep her safe, the idol to keep her safe from not having to feel that trauma. All we did was just turn our attention away from the sky, from sky God, look down inside and start to heal the trauma. And she started to discover what Jesus was saying, that the kingdom of God is within her. And there seemed to be an unbelievable amount of power contained within that, Yeah. And that's my goal for everybody, is that they would come to that. But people seem to have to suffer quite a bit in order to be able to confront the futility of that God. Yeah. If that makes any sense. Are you hearing the bing every time my little text thing goes off?
No.
Okay, good. Because everybody keeps texting me. And,
my speakers like, on the computer aren't very good.
Anyway, that's my theological diatribe.
So you touched on joy, where she plays with joy. I've been geeking out a bit on joy in the last year or so. Explain what you mean by she plays with joy now. Not necessarily like she's nailing it or she's the best player on the team, but she's playing with joy. What is that?
Right. Yeah. Well, what it is it's a way to relating to our lives. So we have, when we do things in life, right? Human beings do things. Jesus said, "Be in the world, but not of it." So when we're in the world, we do stuff. Yeah. And being not of it is we relate to it in a way that's actually, Paul called being in Christ. So we relate to what we do differently, right? So my relationship with my work, and so her relationship with her game, her relationship with her schoolwork, her relationship with her future, her relationship with academics, her relationships with other people, all that shifted when the trauma started emptying itself. It started to shift, and she started to be able to relate to things as they were instead of as what she needed them to be. Yeah. And most of the athletes that come to me, religious or not, and the vast majority of them are not religious, the ones that come to me, their relationship with whatever it is, their craft, their game, is quite toxic. And usually it's a parental relation. They relate to it, asking it to love them, asking it to give them affirmation, asking it to tell them that they're valuable, that they're good. Their identities are completely tied up in it. And when we heal that trauma that caused that, what happens is they get freed up to relate to the game differently. And when you start to relate to a game as a game, turns out it's a lot of fun. And you start play, and this joy, this childlike ability starts coming in where we start to play. Anybody who's ever done creative work, I know all your creative work, I know once in a while you've hit, sometimes it's a grind, and sometimes you hit the vein where there's just this, and there's this kind of joy that comes through your center, and it's this energy just popping out of your body. And that's why most real good creatives, they talk about their ideas more like they gave birth to them than they thought them. Yeah. They didn't
and that idea of pregnancy too, like I gotta, like this thing is in, I gotta get it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even when you talk about writing, you talk about writing a book, right? That's the idea, is that, like Rob Bell told me when he was teaching me about this stuff, he said, you got to live books before you write them, and as you live them, then it's a pregnancy concept. And eventually you'll start to feel the contractions, and it'll start making its way to the birth canal. And when it tells you to push, you'll push, right? But there is that thing of letting those things kind of form in your womb and stuff like that. But that is a profoundly spiritual perspective, and it can't, when your ego has constructed an idol that is helping you survive, it's very difficult to get to that place. Yeah. Not that there's no creativity in the Christian spaces, But I mean, when I was a kid, I used to go, why does Christian music suck? Well, it's because we were so completely limited by our ability to access that part of ourselves. And you see it more and more now. You see more and more and more creativity. But ironically, and this is just what I see, the less religious that the Christians are, the more creative they become. I mean, I was talking to a guy the other day who's it's not City Church, but it was this New Life, big, mega church. And he said, nobody in our church is religious, man. He goes, nobody reads the Bible. He goes, it's just a business. It's a feel-good business. And really, he goes, it's not a religious space. He goes, and they come under the wing of the Assemblies of God. He goes, and he said, as I've interacted with the hierarchy of the denomination, he goes, it's hyper-religious, which is weird because that just doesn't show up in our church. And of course, you walk into their church, it's creative, it's artistic, the music's unbelievable, there's all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's bullshit, it's fast food, it's McDonald's, but it's still, you're going to see more freedom to create and and there's more of an emphasis on joy and peace and love and all those kind of things. And of course, hardcore religious people say, well, that's not really Christianity, but I mean, that's the thing, is the more the idol is in charge, the less we can actually be free to feel, create, move, suffer.
That's Brene Brown, right? Like, that's a big part of her work, is realizing the fact that, I think she was the first one to coin the phrase certainty addiction.
Yeah.
Because where there's certainty, there's no vulnerability.
Right.
And where there's no vulnerability, there's no creativity. Right. The only time people can get creative is when they're vulnerable, right? Is when I'm going to get up on stage like a comedian, for example, or a singer, or you're going to put that thing out there, that piece of yourself, you're going to put it up out there and people can shit on it, right? Like, you're going to be vulnerable. And that's a big part of it. Like, you're going to fail too. You're going to fail. It's not if you're going to fail, it's when you're going to fail and how much you're going to fail. Like, that's just part of life. And again, like that breaking the ego, right? Like, that's a big part of this conversation. What is the spiritual? What is flowing out from center? This metaphor of the heart that the Jews came up with, right? The blood is pumping from the center of my chest to the tips of my fingers and the tips of my toes. What is in that and blocking that? I had a friend, speaking of porn, that was talking about, oh, well, if you Christians can just get, you're all sexually oppressed and that's why you have a problem with porn. And then I pointed him towards NoFap, right? Andrew Rhodes has started NoFap. Like, he's an atheist. There's a lot of atheists. There's a lot of people who have this unwanted behavior that it's blocking something in there, right? Like, it's that thing that's blocking them. And it's not just religion, is it, Seth?
No, it's trauma. Ultimately, it's trauma. We create religion in order to help us deal with our trauma. That's it. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. Religion can be atheistic by nature. It can be a financial structure of some sort. It can be, it can be any structure in which that functions as an emotional lifeboat for us is carries that burden. But ultimately, every human being, trauma is the human condition. Every single human being suffers from PTSD. You were articulating it earlier when you were talking about younger parts of you showing up. That is what PTSD is. The younger parts of us that didn't get their needs met in childhood, that are still expressing those same needs, and they're stuck in their trauma. They're stuck in those needs. And so, where you see insecurity, where you see control, where you see, jealousy, where you see projection, judgment, blame, all of that is the expression of PTSD in our lives. That's all of it. People trying to get their needs met. We get control. Porn is a great story to meet a mother narrative. Or a power narrative. There were a lot of people. Another industry that's skyrocketing right now is video games, right? Like my brother just scratching the itch, man. I've been playing video games like crazy with my son, and it's been super fun. Like, well, there's narratives there, there's stories there. I've dealt with a lot of kids. There's 16-year-old kids that feel powerless in their lives, but man, when they play Fortnite, that power and that adrenaline and all that stuff kicks in. All of it becomes something that keeps me alive ultimately. Now, if I stop all of it, this is why silence can be so disruptive, because I stop it all and I have to feel. I have to feel in that moment. I was working with a client today, and he was like, he masturbates like 10 times a day. And he's like, how do I stop doing that? We're kind of early on in the process. And I said, well, there's a feeling that presents there's a trauma in your body that gets triggered, and your ego immediately kicks into fight or flight, and it goes into its escape plan. It's a natural, earthquake evacuation plan, and it goes right into that. And masturbation is the way of not only getting you the chemicals you need, but getting you, there's a feeling, there's a narrative, there's a whole thing that gets there, and it keeps you from ever feeling it. But if you, in that moment, or we're just working on raising awareness, if we can come to the point where when you actually notice there's the desire, and you can bring your attention down into your body where the trauma's held, it's going to blow your mind what's there, what presents. You're going to be like, oh my God, what is that thing in my chest? And you'll start to see it and notice it and feel it. And that's every human being.
I think the shame narrative is a big reason why too, whether it's Christians or not, the shame narrative, because sex is that thing. Like sex is the thing that, we're taught very young that you dress up, you put some clothes on, right? You got to stop running around naked at some point. Right. And then it becomes the thing that you don't really talk about. Like, it's embarrassing, right? At some point, we grow up into young adulthood, and for women, it's, well, this is part of my body that, it smells bad, or, for guys, it's awkward. Like all of a sudden it gets hard in class, and I don't like it, and I don't talk about it, Yeah. And so that narrative starts to play out. The more we don't touch on that part of our body, right? Or that part of our feeling the way we feel about our own body.
Sure. Well, that's the responsibility of parents too, right? That's part of, that's I was talking to a youth pastor one time, and we were talking, I interviewed her for a thing, and we were chatting about it, and she's like, yeah, like parents think that they'll have one conversation that lasts 100 minutes, and they think that that's going to do the trick of helping. She goes, I always tell parents, you need to have 100 1-minute conversations instead of one 100-minute conversation. Like if you can, we have to do that. I mean, I'm watching that with my kids because we've been watching a lot of movies, obviously, during this time. And anytime someone kisses in a movie, my daughter freaks out, and I can see they're looking at me going, is this good? Is this okay? My son's in love. We've been watching Star Wars, the Clone Wars, and there's this character named Ahsoka Tano, and she's like a Jedi apprentice kind of thing. My son's completely in love with her. I could tell he's totally in love with her, and he's getting those funny feelings down there, kind of thing, And it's so funny because I don't even wait for him to say anything. I just go, feels pretty good. Because I'll see him kind of messing with himself. I'm like, yeah. So he like, if you were to ask him, hey, why are you scratching down there all the time? He'd just go, it feels good. I just think that's cool, like, because we just approach it that way. Yeah, it feels good, and it feels good to feel good. We just always tell him, hey, just don't do it when you're at school in front of people. That's something that's just for you. And he's like, okay. So, our whole goal is to just remove that shame as much as humanly possible, so that he's not afraid to come and go, Dad, I met this girl. We could actually have a productive conversation about sex instead of zero conversation, which is what I had.
So, yeah, me too.
We had a book. Did I ever tell you about the book that was on the shelf called Almost 12: The Story of Sex?
No.
It stared at us my whole childhood, and we laugh and point and giggle, thinking someday my dad's going to have to pull it. We assume when we're almost 12, he'll pull that off the shelf. And then I still remember, man, nobody ever talked to us about anything ever. And then one day, I think I was almost 12. I think I was probably 10, 11 years old, just before we moved to Africa. And me and my brother upstairs in a room, and my dad comes walking, and he's got it in his hands. And we're like, oh, man. We start laughing. He's like, your mom wants me to read this to you guys. And he sits down, and he just makes fun of the whole thing. And he laughs with us, and we all laugh, and we're, punching each other and having fun doing the dad thing. And I realize now, I think back, and I'm like, oh man, he was completely embarrassed, totally ashamed himself, and didn't understand for 1 second how unbelievably freaking important it was that he engage us. And that's why when I was 19, I still didn't know what masturbation meant, and had no freaking clue. And I was a good looking kid too. I ended up modeling in San Francisco, and the shit that was said to me down there, I didn't understand anything. What was going on? I didn't know anything was going on. I'd be at these auditions and these things, and people would say these things to me, and I part of that culture. Everybody just sleeps with everybody. I was scared shitless, man. Scared to death. Totally
stay pure, Seth.
Oh, dude, and I was just like, good. I remember this one photographer. He's 99.9% of the photographers are gay, and that's fine. But like when you're, you know, a young innocent kid and you're an evangelical Christian kid, you don't have a clue. I remember he's taking a picture of me, he's trying to get me this sexy look or whatever, and he's just like, come on, and, you know, he's saying stuff. I remember one point he pops out, he goes, listen, this isn't working. He goes, I just need you to picture 2 girls doing the nastiest thing you can think of to yourself. And I'm like, I was like, I go, I don't think you're aware of just how innocent I probably am. And he goes,
all right,
are you like good Christian boy or something? I go, yeah, kind of. And he was like, sorry, man. Like, he was like, what the hell am I supposed to do with you? You know,
right.
it was awful. And I was just, and it sucks, man. I had no clue what to say, how to act, what to do. I was scared to death of this intense thing happening in my body, because women were throwing, for my entire 20s, girls were just throwing themselves at me. I didn't have a fucking clue what to do. You know?
I remember Amy talking about that. Like, yeah, I got me one of the Taylor twins.
Yeah, I was kind of famous in that way. And if girls had known, you know, I went to a small Christian college too. I had like 6 different girls tell me that God had told them that I was supposed to marry them. You know, that happens, by the way, you know, Christian colleges. And I'm like, you didn't tell me that. I don't know what to do, but I was scared, because what if you did? I'm fucked. You know, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Wow.
But the thing is, point being, man, when we talk about, ultimately, it's funny because you and I have never really talked about parenting in this context. We talked a lot about theology in the church and this kind of stuff, but ultimately, it's on us, man. It's on us as parents to guide them. And that's the funny thing about the church and all the influence of religion and all that stuff. None of that means shit compared to parenting, compared to the influence a parent has on a child. And if a parent is not scared to let their child be a human being and just show them, here's the world you're having, and I'm right here, and I love you, and you're safe, and your feelings are good, and your desires are good, and you just give them that goodness, you feed them that, their spirits will guide them, man.
Yeah.
We can trust the imago Dei. You can trust the image of God inside a child, you know, to guide them through that complex, you know, maze of sexuality. Yeah, they're gonna fuck it up sometimes, but my kids, I guarantee you, are not even gonna be close to the fuck up that I was.
Yeah.
Not even close, you know. So.
Yeah, man. It's being vulnerable in yourself about it too, and talking about it, and not being. It's not that you're not going to be embarrassed, but recognizing that embarrassment is kind of part of the game, right?
Well, you know what's funny? I don't think I'm going to be embarrassed at all. I don't think I'm going to be embarrassed at all.
Yeah.
You know, with my kids, because I've realized that, you know, but like you said yourself, if you've come fully to your own story and you've healed your shame and if you come fully through that and you've lived that, then there's no reason to ever be embarrassed by it. You know, and that's, you hit on Brene Brown's work. I mean, Brene Brown, that's really the thing. Like, we have to come fully into ourselves before we ever have anything helpful to say to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have to live these stories before we tell them. You know that as somebody who's been talking to you for years, you can't take anybody anywhere if you haven't been there. You know, especially your own kids. My son gets the benefit from all the suffering and all the thing, and he'll have his own stories and his own suffering, but I have a feeling it won't be as much as I went through.
Yeah, man, me too. There was a guy the other day. I was on Facebook, and some guy did a live thing, and I've heard of this guy before. And you know, I'm friends with a lot of pastors and people that are, you know, higher ups in churches and stuff like that. And he starts live streaming this thing about discipleship, right? And it was just a lot of diagrams and charts, but it's the parenting aspect. Like, God loves us like that, and you can't put that on a schematic, right, Seth? Like, the teaching of that, it's grace, it's love, it's being present, like you said, being present. You know, again, Brene Brown's work is like showing up, like you're showing up for your kids, you're showing up for the thing. That's a lot of this idea of what you and I would touch on, and maybe why we're not super popular amongst most Christians today, because there seems to be so much like, I want the answers, like, give me a ABC, you know, step 1 through 5. Maybe closing out the show, what Seth Taylor today, how would you define discipleship?
Discipleship. Well, I would define it as the ancients defined it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Remember, Jesus wasn't a Christian, right? So discipleship was an ancient rite of passage, and long before the Jewish religion, it was Hinduism was 5,000 years old. Discipleship was a part of what they did, because the understanding was that if you want to learn something, you find your teacher, and then you trust your teacher, and then you follow your teacher, right?
Yeah.
Like the Jewish rabbis, right? This, the old saying, what was that ancient prayer that they had? May the dust of your rabbi always be upon you, right? You would follow so closely to your rabbi that the dust from his feet would kick up and you'd be just covered in it, right? The idea of discipleship is that we find our teacher and then we follow our teacher all the way, and so the whole idea for me is that if they can first find the desire that they have, I want to have that experience in my life. And then we find someone who's gone through it, find someone who's living the way you want to be able to live, not just from an experience standpoint, money or whatever. But I noticed at the beginning, I would look at different people that I admired, Pete Rollins and Rob Bell and these guys. And I remember going, Rob, I want to experience my life the way Rob experienced his, to be able to do big things, do super creative things, watch your world fall apart and still come out on the other side, have the courage and joy and peace and love. I was like, that's the way I want to live. And so I found a way to hang out with the guy. And then whatever he told me to do, I did. And to this day, if he said it to me, Rob Bell's teaching is law. That's discipleship. Because I just said he got to where he is because of what he knows and what he learned from his teachers. And then I'm going to learn from him. And of course, I've taught hundreds of people the things that Rob taught me. Right. And I have people that follow me that are essentially disciples of mine. There's a handful of guys on my pilgrimage that I would very much say are and they'd probably even embrace that title, but it's not a formal kind of thing. But discipleship is where you see someone, you go, whatever that is, I want it, and I will do anything. I'm willing to die for it. That's what you notice that was the test, the litmus test for a true disciple. Jesus was always like, yeah, as long as you're willing to leave everything. You leave your family, disown your mother and father, right? Eat my flesh, drink my blood, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. Once you wanted what that person has that bad, now you become a disciple. And that's how I was with Rob. I was very much a disciple of Rob, because it's not a success in his money that I wanted. I wanted to be able to do what I loved every day, make money doing it. Wake up and just love, he talked a lot about what gets you up in the morning. He goes, it's just getting up in the morning with that drive inside you, because it's just pure passion pouring through you right on into your work. But I wanted to experience my life the way he did. I watched the way one time he took one of his kids, me and him, we went to a soccer game together, and I watched the way him and his son related to each other. And I'm like, that's how I want to relate to my kids someday, And then I decided that to execute what he was saying was the only thing that mattered. And it didn't matter. I'll starve if I have to in order to be able to do what he says. So that's discipleship.
Interesting.
And if we had that, man, find your teacher. If people in that more ancient form, go find your teacher, and then whatever they tell you to do it. No matter how old you are. If there's anybody out there listening who's like, well, I'm 50 years old, I can't do this thing. No. If you want to do this, go find your teacher and do exactly what they tell you.
Yeah.
And do it until your life looks like that. But
find your teacher. That's interesting. Yeah. I've had a lot of teachers over the years. I don't know if I've ever found one that I care enough about what they're doing to emulate it.
Well, it's not that you care about them. It's that you care enough about what you want to do.
Right.
And you can see that they did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you kind of meld your own story. It's not like you're copying them, but you're melding your own experience or discipline into how they pulled off whatever the heck they're doing.
And it's kind of what you're saying. When I followed Rob, of course, my personality, my calling, my talents, my abilities, I didn't know. Okay, so a lot of people don't know this, but I'm in the world of youth sports, parenting, culture changing, mental and emotional health in youth sports. That's kind of my main area of work. And in that space, I'm making giant waves in the culture. Okay? It's really happening. I didn't know I would end up in that space. If you could tell me, 10 years ago, if you say, what's your dream job? I would have said, that's it. But when I followed Rob down this path, I didn't know that that was where I would end up. But I knew that here you had a guy who learned how to do what he loved the most, what he felt the most passionate about, didn't give a shit about money, didn't give a shit about success. What he wanted to do was wake up every morning and do the thing he loved, and he wanted to change the world. That was it. He wanted to leave the world a beautiful, more amazing place. And I was like, and he was willing to endure hell to get it. And that was all that mattered to me. So I would emulate and copy everything he did, you know, as far as that process goes. I was just like, just teach me how. And he just give me gold, and I just write it down, and I write it down. And I there was days where there was times, one time I flew to LA. I literally I had $265 in my checking account. The plane ticket was $260. And I spent it, and I got down there. I literally had a few bucks. I took a bus for 2 hours from LAX to meet at a coffee shop a block from his house, so that he would spend 90 minutes with me in a coffee shop. And I just asked questions and wrote. And then I got back on a bus and went back to the airport.
Yeah.
And that was literally, and it was worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to live my life and feel the way I feel. Now, I don't do what Rob does. And yeah, I speak a lot. I stand on stages and I speak and I write books like Rob does, and I create things and I create content like Rob does in a totally different vertical, in a totally different way. And I never thought I'd end up here, but I am. But man, it's because it was the pearl of great price.
Yeah.
That's the pearl of great price. I bought the field.
Yeah.
You know, I found it, instead of just going and picking up the pearl, I'm like, I'm buying the fucking field, man.
Right.
That was it. And I've been homeless through this process.
Yeah.
My kids in sleeping bags and backpacks in a car. I've been hungry. I've gone hungry. I've done it, and it didn't matter. I was pressing forward no matter what.
Yeah.
It was going to stop me, because and ultimately it's because I had to find out if God was real, and if this God is love thing was an actual thing. And when I did, I don't know, man. I've discovered something very, very true about the nature of God. You know.
Yeah.
It's the pearl of great price. You know?
Yeah. So true. Seth, thanks for doing this. Thanks for being on the podcast. And
Absolutely, man. I love this setup, by the way, man. This, you know, we did so many little podcasts on your little tape recorder, man. It's kind of fun to hear your voice in full microphone and inflection.
Yes, I got one of the great. I should spend a little money on this. I got a P filter.
There's a lot of podcasts out there, but there are very few voices like yours, man. So
I pop my P's though, so I got this. I got pop my P's.
Oh, do you really? I've got a mic. I've got a mic up here. I got one of those filters as well. So
there you go.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I'm signing out. Thanks for
all right, man.
Thanks for doing this again.
Thank you for
having me. There we go.